Hello everyone, welcome back to day whatever of Java coding. Today we're going to be learning about arrays and array lists, and they're debatably the most useful class of coding. And so, again, what is an array? So arrays are they're basically a list of other variables, usually primitive variables. When I say primitive, I mean one of the basic data types like integers, uh, characters, floats. These are all the basic data types. We'll talk about classes and how to store multiple classes later on. So arrays, they have that's cool, right? You can store a bunch of these different variables into one variable by creating a list of them. But there is a little like caveat or whatever. There's a little downside, and that these arrays, the moment you make them, they will have a fixed length. When I say a fixed length, I mean they can only store so many things, and you can't increase or decrease the number of things you store in them later. Now that seems really like that seems really uh, that seems like a really big downside, but we will learn to get through that and how to handle that. So, again, basically you can't change the number of things you put inside of that list. And arrays can only store things of the same data type. You can't store in an array you can't store in an array a string here and then an integer here and then a character there. It has to be all integers or all strings or all characters. And another thing is another way to imagine an array is if you imagined a variable. A variable is a box, right? You can store the box has a label, right? The thing you call it, right, which is the variable name, and also the data type. That's the other label. It has two labels: what you want to put inside of it and what you want to call that box. And if you imagine a variable as a box, you can imagine array as a set of set of connected boxes. Now they all have a shared label, which is what you can put in them, the data type, and they also have a shared name, the variable name or the name of the array. So inside of this array, you can store a bunch of different things, and the number of boxes cannot change. And yeah, we basically use arrays to store a bunch of data. So if you have a list of your grades, right? Your grades, you don't want to store them in one variable each. If you could store them inside of a single array, right, inside of one list, that would be a lot more useful. So now we're gonna hop into our favorite Java IDE and compiler, or basically a text editor, codeva.io. We're gonna create a new project. Again, the name of your project doesn't really matter. It just helps you remember what this project is for. We're gonna call it arrays. Let's create this project. And let's call this. What are we gonna call our file name? Yeah, we're gonna call it grades. I don't know why I keep talking about grades. I'm so sorry. Grades.java, right? So inside of our grades.java class, wow, I committed like a really bad thing. Usually people capitalize the first letter of their class, but it doesn't really matter. It's just consistency again, one of the three coding practices. So, how do you make an array? Well, you start out. It's almost identical to making a variable. So what we do is, oh no, what did I do? Okay. What we start out is we say what we want to put inside. We're gonna store a set of integers, right, or your grade. Now we could use floats, and when I say float, I mean a number with a decimal. That way we can have more accurate grade percentage. But let's just stick with something basic right now. And then after you put integer, right, you put two square brackets, and that tells your compiler or IDE or text editor, hey, we're gonna make an array of these things. Array of grades. Oh, that's really bad. That's really bad. When I say really bad, I mean I shouldn't have a name of a variable be the same name as my class. So I'm gonna say grade array. Yeah, grade array. Okay. This is going great already. Grade array. Now, an array is actually an object. So remember, or array is actually a class. And if you remember what a class is, it's just a way we can store, way we can make complex things. And how do you create an object? We say new. And when we say new, we're saying, hey, make a new version of this array class, which can store a bunch of things, and let's do something with it. So now there's two different ways of creating an array. The first way is, hey, I know I want to put 5 things inside of this array, but I don't know what yet. Here's how you do that. You say int, you put the square brackets again, and you say 5. That's saying, hey, I want to store 5 things inside of this array. Now, what if we already know what we're going to store inside of this array? What if we already know our grades? Then we'll say int array with the square brackets, but instead of putting something inside, after that, you put these curly brackets, and you say the numbers that you want. 96, 57, 82, 99, and 89. So, and you end it with another curly brackets and a semicolon. What this says is, hey, I'm making an array that can store integers. Oh, ow. And it's an array of those integers. I'm gonna name it grade array, which means I can use it later on. It's because it's an object, I'm creating a new object using it. And I'm saying integer. I'm saying, hey, I want it to store, it's an integer array class, but I want to put inside of it all of these numbers. Now, why don't we have to put 5 here? Oh, what did I do? Okay, why don't we have to put 5 here? It's because when we already say what we want to put inside of it, that already declares the length of our array. That already says, hey, we want this number of things inside of it. We don't have to put the number of things we want inside of it, inside of the square brackets. So, that's how you create an array. Now we're gonna learn how to use it. All right. So once you have declared your array, right, either with the length or the initial values, we can use the thing called the index. All right, the index to place values, to use and change the values inside of that array. Now, an important thing about the darn. Okay, sorry, I'm looking for markers just in case I ever want to use this whiteboard, but I can't find them right now. Yeah. An important thing to note about an array is that the index, or the place of that array, there's an order in that array, right? Let's go back to our array. There's an order of items, right? The order matters in this case. And an important thing to note about arrays is that the first term technically has a place or an index of 0. So in counting in code, we actually start by saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And this is actually super important because we're accustomed as human beings to counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh wow, I miscounted there. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But computers actually start by saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that means that means we have to be super careful when we're using indexes or places. Excuse me. Wow. Now, there's an important function that we have to use. And if you remember, classes, like in our grade class, they can have functions, right? We can have a function here, void, blah. We can give it parameters, and we can give it a curly brackets. So objects have functions, right? And a function of the grade array or any array object is the length function. And now the length function is super important. We're going to create a new integer, array length, and we're going to give it the value of the length of the grade array. Now, how do you do that? Now, we already know the length. It's 5, right? But let's say we're creating a new array and we don't know the number of items inside it for some reason. What if we want to change the number of items inside of it later on? And we don't want to change the array length variable every time. Well, there's actually a function inside the array function, or inside of the array class, that gives you the length of that function, or of that array, and it's called .length. Now, I can't just put .length, I have to say grade array .length. Oh, it's not a function. Ah, it's a variable. It's a property. I forgot. Okay. So again, yeah, classes can have properties or variables, right? They can have integer length, right, equals 0. They can have integer weight equals 0. And to use another class's or another object's variable or property, you say the name of that object which we created called grade array, and then dot length. All right. Now this returns us. It gives us an integer. So now we know the length of that array. Now why is that important? Well, what if we want to loop? Okay, let me. Before I tell you about how to loop through an array, I'm gonna show you how to access the values inside of an array. It's very simple. All you have to do is say grade array, and then square brackets. And inside of the square brackets, you want to say the place or the index of what you're working of which value you want to work with. So let me create a comment here so that we can't it won't actually affect the code. Indexes, right, or the place. This is 96 is place 0, right? 57 is place 1, 82 is place 2, 99 is place 3, 89 place 4 is place 4. And so the weird thing is in coding, when we create an array, when we say it has a length of 5, the last number in our array actually has a place of 4. So we have to get used to that. We have to get used to going back and forth between the length and the actual last place. So grade array, what if we want to change our 57? Let's say the teacher gave us a retake and we can actually change that grade for that test or whatever. Then we say grade array of 1, right? Because it's place 1, which it's place 1, or index 1. It's usually called an index. We want to change that to 79, all right? It's a very hard subject. We could only get a C on it. That's okay. A C plus at least. We can change it to 79. We can plus equals 79. And if you remember what plus equals does, is it says, hey, I want to add 79 to that variable and put it back inside. I want to change it by 79. We can actually, what if we want to print that number out? We can say system.out.println grade array of 1. Again, square brackets and the index inside of that square brackets, the index or the place of that number or that value. Let's go ahead. Let's print. Also, we're gonna print the length. Let's see if this works. Let's see if Codiva works today. It does. So if you can see that in the corner of the screen, right now I have 57 inside of place 1 and I have 5 inside of length. And for you guys to practice on your own, you can go ahead and pause the video, test around, hopefully get used to the indexes starting at 0 and ending at 1 minus the length. Or the length minus 1. The length minus 1. And working with the array length in general. And once you come back, we're going to learn how to loop through an array. So what is looping? If you remember what looping is, it's repeating something over and over. Here we changed, if we say grade array of 1 plus equals like 10, let's say the teacher curved all the grades 10 points, right? We don't want to say grade array like that, like this. We don't want to change every single value one by one because that's lazy coding. It takes too long. I forgot 0 here. And so we're going to use a loop. So if you remember the two main types of loops, there's a while loop, and I'll show you how to do it with both loops. And actually, one method is way more efficient than another. So in both methods, the while function, while and for, and the for function. The for function is a simplified while function that's only meant for counting, which is perfect here. All we're doing is counting the index one by one. One by one. While the while loop, it's meant to repeat things for a continuous period. So in both cases, we're going to initialize a counter variable, right? Counter equals 0, right? Now, when you initialize a counter variable, you don't have to name it counter. You can name it anything you want. It's just naming variables smartly in a way that tells you what the variable does, it will help you code. It's again consistency, clarity, concisity, if that's a word. Int counter equals 0 while that counter is less than grade array dot length. We're gonna do something, right? Let's just say for now system.out.println. Now, what do we want to print out? We want to print out an increasing index, right? We don't want to print out the same index over and over again. We want to print out an index that changes over time. And hey, what's a variable that changes over time while we're repeating this over and over? Our counter variable. So we say here counter and semicolon. There you go. We're accessing index 0 because counter starts at 0. The counter starts at 0, right? And then the counter increases to 1, and then to 2, and then to 3, and then to 4, and it doesn't go to 5. Now, the beauty of this is that we don't have to say array length minus 1. And that's because we're using less than, all right? The less than equality sign. We're saying, hey, yeah, while this counter is less than the length of the array, which the array length is 5, we don't want to, we're going to print this over and over again. We're going to print an increasing counter and the grade array index of that counter. And so the beauty is, hey, it starts at 0, right? It starts at 0, goes to 1, 2, 3, 4, and doesn't go to 5 because 5 is not less than 5. And here you go. It's the beauty of the starting at 0 counter. Because it's using less than, it actually goes through the entire length of the array for us, as long as we start our counter at 0. If that doesn't really make sense, just think about it like just go one by one. We start at counter at 0, increase counter by 1, 2, 3, and 4 until this while loop doesn't make sense anymore, until the inside of it is false. And you'll see that it would have looped through the array, the entire array. Yeah, this confused me at first because, hey, our length goes to 5, right? Our length starts at our length is 5 because we have a 5 an array of size 5, and we're using a counter variable to count up to that number, right? To loop through our array, but our array only has indexes up to 4. So we use less than in order for it not to count 5, but only go from 0 to 4. And that allows us to count through all the indexes. I probably repeated myself like 6 times there. I hope you guys understand that. Oh, and let me show you how to do it with 4. And 4 it's just so beautiful. Check this out. 4, it's even simpler. Now in 4, usually declare a variable name that's super short, so you don't like have a bunch of words in there. So we're gonna set an integer. Let's just pick I. I don't know why, but I seems to be really common counting integer. Or wow, maybe it's because I is like the first letter of integer. All right, whatever. It's super good at it's super good for counting for some reason, or super used for counting. So I is less than grade array dot length, and then increase I by 1. And this is the structure of the 4. Hey, initialize the counter variable, right? Oh, I forgot something on our while loop. Oh, I'm such a bad coder. Okay, one thing I forgot is how do we increase counter? We want to increase it by 1 every time. Otherwise, counter will always be 0. It'll always be less than 5, and our thing will repeat forever. We don't want that. We want it to increase. And here, yeah, okay. How does the 4 structure look? What does the 4 structure look like? It starts. We declare a counter variable. All right, something that we can store the number we're at right now, the current counter we're at right now, and then we start at 0. Then we say, hey, as long as it's less than the array length, we're going to repeat this thing over and over again. Now, in order to end this loop so it doesn't repeat forever, we get to the next step by increasing I by 1. We increase our counter. How do we increase our counter? And you can also decrease the counter, start from a high number, and say as long as it's greater than something. But we're going to start from the bottom of the array, start at 0, and go to 4, which is less than the array length. Okay, so how do we use the for loop. It's the same thing. We say system.out.println grade array with the index of I, because I is our counter variable in this case. So we shortened what? This is 5 lines of code to 3 lines of code. And when you're dealing with like huge file sizes and huge array sizes, excuse me, this is shortening from 5 lines to 3 lines becomes super important. And guess which one we use more when dealing with arrays? We use the for loop a lot more because it's so beautiful. You say, okay, I shouldn't say it's so beautiful. It's only beautiful for me, alright? And a couple other weirdos like myself. So as long as it's less than array length, right? Our counter variable is less than array length. We're gonna increase I, and then we're gonna print out that whatever's inside that array of that index. So let's just test this out. Bam! It printed a bunch of numbers. Yeah, it printed the same array twice. It printed, hey, 96, 57, 82, 99, 89, and then it printed it all out again. I'm gonna do something really whack here. Actually, yeah, okay. How about instead of the first okay. Now, just a little sample problem, I guess. We're gonna ditch the while loop, right? It's lame. We're not gonna use it, right? No, trust me, the while loop it does have its uses, but for arrays, we're gonna use the for loop. Again, in my example, what if the teacher curved all of the tests, increased everyone's grade average for every single test by 10, and instead of writing the same line over and over again of, hey, grade array of 1 or grade array of 0 increased by 10, grade array of 1 increased by 10, we're using this for loop, and we can access that every single variable inside of that array by using the for loop. So we say simply grade array at I, and grade array at I, it means, hey, do this for every single number inside that array, starting at 0 and then ending at 4. Plus equals 10. Now did I do something wrong? Oh, no, it's just, it lagged. Alright. Oh boy, my internet, I feel like it's gonna start crashing soon. So let's get rid of all this, because it's clogging up our console, and let's print these numbers out. Oh, why did I run it twice? Okay, so it printed 106. Wow, we did it, we got a score over 100. 106, 67, 92 instead of 82, 109, and 99. So it worked perfectly. It increased all of our numbers by 10 and then printed them all out, one by one. So now we're going to look at array lists. What is an array list? It's super similar to an array, except array lists, instead of storing simple data is like an integer, a string, a character, a float, we can actually store objects. Whoa, it's crazy. So if we create a bunch of animal objects, like in our previous video or the example then, we can actually store them in an array, and we can apply a function to all of them if we wanted to, like increasing some value of theirs. And one more thing about array lists that breaks everyone's mind and is the best part about array lists is that array lists have dynamic length. Now, if you remember what dynamic means, it means it can change, or it changes, right? And a dynamic length means, hey, we can actually change the length of the array. In a regular array, we can't change the length, it's fixed. But in array lists, we can change it, and that makes it super useful. Now, there are 3 functions, and we create an array list very similar, except with a little caveat, to regular arrays. We create them in a very similar way, except the way we add okay. Sorry, I dazed out for a second there. We have 3 different functions that we can use to add objects in, remove objects, and use an object, right? So, now what if we do want to store regular like integers in there, or strings, or very simple pieces of data in there inside of an array list? Why would you do that? Because you want that dynamic length, right? You want a length that can change. There are actually built-in classes to store simple data. There's an integer class, and all the integer class does is it makes integers. So let's figure out how to use array lists in code. So I'm gonna call this fun with arrays. This project fun with arrays, or array lists, whatever. It doesn't matter. I'm gonna use the example of an animal tamer and an animal class one more time. What the? Where's my? Oh, okay. There it is. Okay, and then I'm gonna create an animal class as well. Gonna let that load. Yeah. This can also help us review how to use classes. So all I want in my animal class for my constructor, let's make these public. Make this a public class and a public constructor so that my animal tamer class can actually use it. Animal, if you remember what a constructor is, it's just the first thing that runs when the animal class is run. What we want to say, what we want to put inside is, hey, I want, actually, I want a name. I want a name, but I don't want to give it a name yet. I want it to change depending on what I put inside. So inside of our constructor, which is the first thing that runs when you create this object, I want to say, hey, string, oh no, connectivity problems. Not again. Okay, I'm back. Phew. Okay. Stream new name. Yeah, you don't want to just say new because then it'll what's the error here? Oh, okay. You don't want to say new just new because that it'll mix it up with keyword. I'm going to say this dot, and remember what this dot is hey, I want to give this specific object a certain property. I want to say this dot name equals new name. So if I ever create a new object, I want it to give itself the name that I put inside the parentheses. As well as I'm also going to create a public, which means my animal tamer class can use it, void say name function. And all the same name function will do is system.outs.println this.name. Now notice I don't put static here, and if you remember what static is hey, I want every single one of these to have this function, and it won't be unique to that specific one. So because it's not static, each specific animal can have a different name, and it will say a different name. Now what I'm going to do here is create an array list. Now array list, the syntax is kind of funky. Instead of just saying like, you know, in this is how you do it in a regular array. Animal with you know, the square brackets, the type of data, which is a class called animal, with square brackets. But instead we're gonna say it's an array list object, which means it'll have the data type of array list, and you have these caret thingies. I think they're called carets, right? Oh, I disconnected again. Oh boy. Okay. I think it's because my computer's heating up a lot and it's like ruining the connectivity or something. I don't know how internet works. Okay. Alright. And so inside of these carets, what we're going to put is the object or class type or class that we're going to use. We're going to put inside a bunch of animals. And that says, hey, what I want to put inside this array list is a bunch of animals. We're going to call this my list. Equals a new, because it's an object, right? We're going to create a new version. Array list with type animal. And it's also a constructor. So what is this error? Oh, I see. Okay. Now the reason I'm getting a bunch of errors is because array lists actually aren't built in. Let's go ahead and import java.util.ArrayList. There you go. Now we can use array lists, and now I can put animal here and animal here. But we're gonna stick with using strings for now because it's just what we're used to. And so yes, if you I forgot that array lists aren't built into the standard Java library, so we have to import it. And luckily, if you downloaded Java or you're using Codiva, you can simply say import java.util.ArrayList, and that'll give you access to the ArrayList class. So again, let's repeat. What this line does here is it just says it returns the integer, the length of that array. So I can say int list length equals my list.size, and that this returns an integer of the size of your list. Now why is it size instead of length? This is just the coder's way, or the Java way, of differentiating between a list and a regular array. So I keep avoiding the problem. How do we use array lists? Well, we can add things. We can add things by typing mylist.add, and we can put it whatever we want inside. Since we're using strings, we're gonna put in a string. Luke, that's my name. We're gonna add another thing. Bob. It's another thing, and these are all actually. We can actually figure out a functional way to do it. So for int I is less than 0 is equal to 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus, we're gonna add my list.add. Now the problem I have is I have to convert an integer to a string. Yeah, we're not gonna worry about that for now. Okay, for now we're just gonna create a list, and I will show you guys how to convert between integers, the class of integers and strings later on in another lesson. But for now, let's just work with regular strings. All right. So how do we get a value from it? How do we get a specific index or such? We say my list dot get. Get 1. Yeah, when I say get 1, it says, hey, get the place in index 1, and so I can store that inside of a new string. New name equals my list.get1, and so it gets, hey, I added Luke, which means it's in place 0. I added Bob, which means it's in place 1, or maybe it's like that for you guys. Get the string inside of place 1 and put it inside new name. So we learned get, add, and we can also use remove. Now there's actually 2 ways to do remove. One way is to say, hey, I want to remove Luke. Alright? The other way is to say, hey, I want to remove whatever is inside index 1. Alright? If there is an index 1. And if there isn't, it'll start erroring out. So make sure you can remove something. Excuse me. So yeah, you can, a lot of these things you can either do it by adding in a specific object, right, which is in our case is a string called Luke and Bob. You can get them by typing the index value, and you can remove them by typing in either the object or the string, right, or the index value. And you can actually add you can add objects at certain index values if you want. Gem. And what this does is it takes whatever's in place 1, shifts it to the right, or shifts it to the right in your case, and puts in 1. Yeah, okay, yeah. And it stores whatever you want to put inside of it, 1. At place 1. Okay, yeah, sorry. I kind of rushed over array lists. In the end, it's just it gives you a bunch of different functions that you can use to create a dynamic increasing, gives you an array with a length that is dynamic. So if you have any more questions, there's the documentation. When I say documentation, I mean there's the Java website that tells you how to use array lists and what other functions they have, because there's like 100 different functions you can use with array lists. You can email me personally, say, hey, how would I do this specific thing using array lists, or can array lists do this? And I would be glad to answer you. You can email me at oneupmhs@gmail.com. There's plenty of other resources that you can find. Now, I'm just here to introduce these topics to you. And the reason I'm here to introduce these topics to you is because we're going to use a lot of them in our the project we're going to be working on very soon. And that is our next lesson. We will be start working on like a cool thing. So let's just finish this up. Let me just finish up arrays. So arrays, a simple array, right, is something that can store sets of data, right? A bunch of different boxes that can store a bunch of the same type of thing, but most of the time it's used for simple data. And a simple data is what we've been talking about. Integers, characters, string is on the fence. You can use it as either. And that array has to have a fixed length. You can't change the number of things you put inside of it. And now there's two ways to create arrays. You can either give it a value of how many things you want to put inside of it, a length, right? Or you can initialize the variables already. Now, if you give it a length, here's a tip. When you give it just a length of how many things you want to put inside of it, it actually puts null values in each of them. So if you try to use it, it'll error out and be like, oh, this is null, there's nothing inside of it. That's just a little tip for you guys. You can loop through an array using a for loop really easily. You can use a while loop, but it's less efficient. And so using the for loop and using the for loop and the array's length, you can loop through it super easily. Go through every single value of that array. Array lists are lists that can store, or basically arrays that can store objects instead of just simple data. And the best part about array lists is you can change the number of items that are inside of it. So it allows for dynamic length. That's our review. We're gonna go into a couple of these example problems or practice problems, and yeah, you guys go, guys. I don't have to read through it, or actually, I'll read through it. We're gonna create an array. Right? We're gonna work with basic arrays for now, of just grades, not letter grades, number grades, and add up all those grades and find the mean average, and as clean and concise and consistent way as possible, and print that mean average. Easy enough. And then the second one is have the user input grades, right? And using the grades that they inputted, print something out. Print out the mean. Yeah, print out the mean again. So those are my example problems. You guys can go ahead and pause, and when you get back to the video, I will be doing them. So, you guys are back. Wow. I hope you guys did the example problems. Now, this is left over from last time. I'm just going to scrap all of this. Alright, so the first problem. We're going to create an array, right, of as many grades as you want. Let's say, let's do 10 of them, alright, 10. So, int array, right? It's gonna store integers. Now we could use floats. It's kind of lame. We're gonna say integer my grades, right? Our class is animal tamer, but we're working with grades. Oh, all right, this is beautiful. It's gonna be a new array, right? A new integer array, which means it can store integers. Now I could say, hey, I want to store 10 grades here, right? And then say my grades of 0 equals like 90. My grades of 1 equals like 87. But because we're not deciding let's just decide, we can already decide our grades up here. We'll just create our grades up here inside the curly brackets. We're gonna say 97 or 92. Let me just, oh wow, that is not an actual grade. Let me just stick with we just plop in a bunch of grades. Now it doesn't matter how many, I'm gonna do more than 10. I'm gonna just start adding a bunch of numbers. And this is another reason why using the array length function is super important. I inputted a bunch of random numbers. I don't even know what the numbers are. How many numbers there are, I mean. I don't even know how many numbers there are. So, how do we add up all of them? Well, let's just declare right now a sum variable. It's going to store the sum of all those numbers. Now, to do that, we have to loop through the numbers. And we're going to start our sum at 0 because, that's just smart. For integer I is less than, integer I equals 0, we're going to start our counter variable at 0. Say I is less than my grades dot length. As long as it's less than the length of the array, we're going to increase I by 1 and do a bunch of stuff. Now, what's the stuff we're going to do? We're going to add to sum, we're going to increase sum by every single value in the array. So, plus equals my grades of I. Now, we could have, again, sum plus equal my grades of 0, sum plus equal my grades of 1, sum plus equal my grades of 2, and do that for every single number, but that's not going to be as efficient. So, we're going to loop through all of them and add every single one from 0 to how many there are to our sum variable. And if you remember what an average is, or a mean, it's, hey, add up all these numbers and divide by the total number of numbers, right? So we added all the numbers already. We have our sum. And we're going to divide. Now, the thing is, we can't use an integer anymore. Why? Because what if our number doesn't divide perfectly? What if it divides and gives you the decimal? We can't put that inside of integer because integer is only used to whole numbers. So we're going to say float's average, right, will equal sum divided by my grades dot length. Bam. And again, the reason I use a float, which is a number with the decimal, a certain number of decimal points, and it's like 32 or something, a bunch of decimal points. We're going to create an average variable that is a float, and we're going to divide the sum by the number of items that are inside my grades. And we're going to simply print out that average. Average. Let's run this. 68. Oh, it was a whole number. That's crazy. Okay. I guess we didn't need to use a float, but in case that it didn't divide perfectly, we would have had a decimal point. 68.0. That's our average. That's a very sad average, but that's okay. We will improve, alright guys? So, next step. Do the same except have the user input the grades. Now the problem with this, because we're using arrays and not array lengths, we can't ask them for any number of grades that they want. We have to, at some point, we have to cut them off and use the number that they we have to give them only a certain number of options to put it in. And so this is where declaring, hey, all I want is 5 grades. This is where that becomes super important. So now there is a better systematic way of doing this using for loops and stuff, but I'm gonna stick to just doing it hard coding it manually. And now what do we have to import? We have to import the scanner class. Import java.util.scanner, and now we can take in user input. So another am I tripping? Oh no, it's just lagging. Okay. So we're gonna create a new scanner object. We're gonna call it input equals new scanner system.in. All this is saying, hey, we're gonna create a new scanner which allows us to get input. We're gonna call that scanner input, and we're gonna give it system.in, which allows it to obtain basically our key values. We're gonna start off by saying system.out.println. What is your first grade, right? We're gonna copy paste and also input.get. Okay, but .next int, I think that's what it's called. .next int, right? My grades of 0 will equal input.next int, and we're basically gonna copy paste this like 5 times. Now, obviously, using a for loop, there's gonna be a lot better way to do this, but you know what? All right. We're gonna do this using a for loop. I could have just copy pasted this like 5 times and changed the index value and like first instead, but we're gonna do this using a for loop. All right. because we're gonna try to make our code as efficient as possible. If it doesn't work out, you guys can see me fail on camera. All right, I is less than my grades dot length. Now a weird thing is, even though where we declared the length here, hey, we want to put 5 things inside of here, and it puts in a bunch of null values, it actually still counts towards the length. The length is still 5, so we can use dot length here. Why is this indented funny? Did I? Okay, I'm not gonna worry about it. So we're gonna copy paste that inside there as well. Now 2 things we're gonna have to change is, hey, instead of starting it as 0, we can say, hey, do it for every I, right? Next, we have to change this. We can no longer ask them for the first grade, right? We're gonna ask them for the first, second, third, and fourth. Now, I could like have it matched to an array of like first, second, third, and fourth. I could store those into a string and then use the index of those strings as like use I as the index of the strings to connect it between the two. But just for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna just add I plus 1. Yeah, I plus 1. Okay, so I kind of encounter a problem. Hey, I'm connecting this string to an integer to another string. I would have said, what, I plus 1, right? Because it starts at 0 and we want to count normally, it would be, you know, you wouldn't say, what is your 0th grade? You would ask them for their first grade, right? And then second grade, and third grade, and fourth grade. Yeah, there's no easy way to do this, but I'm connecting all these using like plus signs, right? And there's actually a better way to do this. It's called printf, and it takes variables and stores them inside certain points in the code. But another way to convert between a string and an integer, or an integer to a string, right, is integer dot to string. And so this is really funky. The best way to do it is, yeah, just to do this manually, and I will show you again later on what's the best way to encounter some of these problems. But for now, let's just hard code this. Let's just get these practice problems over with. All right, I'm getting tired of this. Okay, what is your what is your third grade? First one-third grade. It's 92. Now, one thing to keep in mind is I don't code this very smartly in a way that, hey, what if they don't put an integer here? What if they put a float or like a string? What if they put like poop or something? Then what do you do then, huh? So we usually in coding, we would have a lot of like fail safes, right? We would have a lot of ifs and elses. Check, hey, is what they gave us an integer? If not, we're gonna either convert it to an integer or we're gonna ask them again. But again, let me just hard code, finish this practice problem, so we can move on with our lives. And yeah, okay. 92. What is your third grade? Let's say we did really badly. We got like a 10%. Third grade, 98. Right, we did really well on that one. Third grade. Oh. Okay, it finished the code. I never went through the grades. Okay, I never went through them and added a sum. So we're going to declare a sum variable. Oh, this is going great, guys. Okay, we're going to declare a sum variable, right? And we're going to add, after the input of the grades, we're going to add to the sum variable what they gave us. My grades of I. At the end, we're going to declare a float, an average, and that average will equal sum divided by my grades dot length. Okay, this is going great, guys. What's a better way to say? Maybe I should do I think that's a better. Yeah, okay, alright. And then, oh wait, almost forgot to print out the average, right? That would have been very sad if we just did all that work for nothing. Okay, average, not the sum. So yeah, I will show you guys printf later if we ever get to it. Yeah, there are tons of geez. Okay, yeah, there are tons of coding videos online that will show you the little nitty gritty little other things that you can do with code, with print statements and other little statements, other little like little caveats here and there. But I'm just trying to show you the basics that we'll use for our actual program, our actual like what we're gonna be doing later on. All right, just bear with me, please. All right, let's just run through this. All right, work. All right, what is your first grade? First grade. A 99, and let's just say we did really well on all of these, right? Wow, okay. Our average 88. We did it. We did it. Okay, actually, we don't have to. Do we? Does it work like this? It does. Okay, we don't even have to convert between an integer and a string. Alright, you can just add strings to integers. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter. Alright. Okay. Well, we're done with that practice problem. We're done with arrays. We're done with array lists. Even though they're so important, I went over them really badly. If you have any questions, please email me. Please contact me on Google Classroom or anything, any way you can, or on the website. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.